everyone, to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, great to be here with you today. And I brought along a special guest.
Yes, I'm so excited. I love when you bring company. This is always exciting.
Cool. Well, why don't we get right to it and introduce Sheri?
Let's do it.
So today we're going to be talking with Sheri Sullivan, who's a partner and global payroll operate leader at Ernst& Young. I think I've known her for a couple of decades, maybe at least, and always in this global payroll space. So I'm super excited to bring her into the conversation. And Sheri, welcome.
Thank you so much, Julie and Pete. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, welcome. Good to have you, Sheri. I'm excited to talk to you about AI, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely something. If you would have asked me a couple of years ago that I would be talking about, I would tell you no, but
Yep.
certainly our whole life has changed.
Yeah, 100%. I'm a practitioner of payroll myself from early days, and I think about that sometimes too. Like the things that we're having at our disposal, and the things that are proliferating. It's truly futuristic, and it's an exciting time to be in payroll for sure.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, hey Sherry. So we have this question we start with when introducing our guests, and we ask everyone how they got started in payroll, or like what was their entry point, or how did they get started, and then after that, we want to know what keeps you here.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, I think none of us raise our hand and say, when I grow up, I want to be in payroll, right?
Yeah.
But certainly, so how I got started in payroll is I had a gentleman call me and ask me to come over and actually look at his business and help him to figure out how to take it internationally. And that was actually the CEO and founder and now chairman of the board of Paychex, Tom Golisano. And so I thought it was an interesting enough model. I went to go meet with him. And quite frankly, I thought, oh, I was a consultant at the time. This will be an interesting 2 to 3 year project. And have some fun along the way. But as you can see, I got hooked on it. I stayed on it. I've been in payroll now for almost 23 years, believe it or not. And I think what keeps me in payroll is the fact that there's still so much left to do. I think the models have lagged behind. Obviously, the technology's lagged behind. And it's such the heartbeat of every single employer, every single employee. Obviously, we all love what we do, but let's be honest, if we weren't getting paid, would we still do it? So I think that's what keeps me, is the whole challenge and the fact that that no one's really solved it. I think the only other thing I'd add is I think, and I would be interested in your thoughts, but I've seen payroll change more over the last 2 to 3 years than it had in the prior 20.
100%. I would absolutely agree. I sit and look at some of the things that are coming about, and the way firms are deploying it, and just the cool use cases they're applying it to. And it's like, where was that when I was a practitioner, right? Managing huge payrolls and dealing with, all that comes with that. It's such a blessing to practitioners, and it's elevating this rich skill set they have and exposing that, I think, for the good, right? Giving people a lot of great opportunities. So good that you made it, and good that you're still here.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, I'm going to
We
have the
got some
barking
dogs.
dog in
Yeah.
the background. I'm so
Oh, it's
sorry. But
okay.
so why
It's
don't we
okay.
just jump in a little bit
Yeah.
and kick off the whole topic of AI, which is maybe like the biggest hot topic on the planet this year for sure.
Oh,
Everybody's
yeah.
talking about it. And I'm really excited that we could focus on AI and payroll and that combination together with you, Sheri. And maybe one of the first things to just talk about is, when folks say AI, like, are we talking about AI, artificial intelligence? Are we talking just about automation that makes business processes easier and simpler? Like what do you see as the differences among all these terminologies and these things that get tossed out and labeled AI when in today's language?
Yeah. That's a great question, because Sheri, I think, just to add something real quick, I think a lot of folks sort of lump automation into a lot of, right, don't lump it into one bucket, but there's such a different diversity in what we're talking about, right?
Yes, there absolutely is. I mean, I think, obviously we've all learned, or I certainly have, thanks to all of the experts here at EY and being part of a lot of those processes, that artificial intelligence has been around for years and years. And certainly we've seen it migrate from having, some abilities that need to be programming in. We've obviously seen the machine learning, we've seen some deep learning, but we really are in a place of generative AI. AI. And so I think your question's really great because I think we do tend to lump everything into that one category and make generalizations, but they're completely different. And I think what we've seen over the last 18 or 19 months is a quantum shift, is a quantum shift in what is generative AI. And generative AI, I think, how is it different from some of these other, whether it's RPAs or other processes? Generative AI is the type of artificial intelligence that can create new content. And I think that's pretty important because that means it can create images, it can create text, it can create audio or video, and it's actually can be trained. And the other ways and the other forms of automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning, you had to really give it, A is the question, B is the answer, these go together. And so you had to really be very, very prescriptive. But now with our large language models, and I've personally seen this with a bunch of the POCs and client pilots that we've done, it actually can take information regardless of language and be able to actually synthesize it, be able to answer questions based on it. And that is why we're in a whole different realm and area when it comes to generative AI. And that really is the definition of generative AI, is an artificial intelligence able to learn and grow. Now, I can tell you one of the things that's really interesting about that is it also, you can't necessarily predict it, right? So some of the concerns is how do I control it and really put up those rails.
Yeah, imagine, like there's a scary element to that too, right? Like, well, if it's thinking and pushing through and making sense of certain things, how will it actually string them together? And and will I be okay with what it puts together and what that output looks like? So I'm imagining there's an awful lot of challenges around controls, or even being able to kind of monitor or have some parameters around the outcomes.
Yeah, I think the exciting thing for me to emphasize in generative is that contextual understanding, and the learning, as you mentioned, that progresses where it learns and comes back with better understanding the next time, right, and the next time. And so, when you think about all of the help that can provide to the practitioner to augment, to the employee to understand the check, to leaders wanting to understand reports or receive guidance from those reports, I think it's all just there's such infinite impact that can happen for HR and payroll. It's super super exciting.
Really is. It really is.
Sherry, the skeptic in me always says, like, is it really possible in payroll, and is it really generating and amalgamating things together in payroll that isn't just returning a number or figure? So I'm so curious to hear a little bit more from your perspective around what is actually really happening in payroll AI wise today, and what you're seeing it can do, and where you're seeing that going.
Yeah, so maybe if we think about some of the use cases, and I'll get into some specifics if you'd like as to how we're using it or how we've seen it used with our clients. And I think the first part is, can it, and this was probably the first use case that you may have seen that we kind of started on, is how can it be used, or the hypothesis was, can it be used to actually answer employee questions for tier 0 and tier 1 more completely, more accurately? And the first step was, can it do it with generic and general information? And the second was, can it do it with PII data? And I think one of the things that was so almost crazy for us to experience is that it was able, I'll give you an example. Before, with artificial intelligence or RPA or anything, you had to actually spend a lot of time programming it. And in order to program it, you actually had to understand and be trained on the technology and on how to program, whether it was zero and ones or whether it was some kind of Python script or whether it was an RPA script, etc. But this technology now allows practitioners and business experts to actually weigh in and be part of that, what is called, in prompt engineering, for example. And that means that you can actually, just with a simple thumbs up, thumbs down, and then some correction on the back end around some of the prompt engineering, actually change the way it answers. And it does really learn through those processes. So the first use case was this. Can it answer employee questions? And I can tell you three of the things that we found out. One is, it didn't matter what source the data, what language the data was in. So one of the things we did was we put in a ton of information about regulatory compliance just to test it, and we put it in I don't know 100 countries. But by the way, the source document was all English, and then we had people around the world in 50 languages plus try and break it, try and ask questions in their language about their country and see if it could actually do it. And one of the things that was really interesting is the capabilities right now already have it. And we've all been through translations that were the words were correct, but the meaning didn't mean anything. But this is totally different. So that was just one example of the fact it's able. And by the way, it absorbed masses amount of data in very little to any time. And within 5 days of just the team working on some prompt engineering, it was able to actually increase the accuracy of answers to over 95%, which is way more than the human. We did some benchmarks on human answers, and humans answers were only able to get in the high 60s. So that's the kind of impact we're seeing. Does that
So
make sense?
yeah, so some of the early use cases that you started talking about were really on the inquiry support side, right? And
That's
that was
right.
yeah. And then I just want to clarify. I think what I'm hearing, and what maybe I wanted to make a point of is this is AI that is contextualizing and ingesting information from a finite location. It's not just broadly across the ecosystem of Google and data ingesting, right? So this is fit for purpose type information that you're bringing in to have them test and try out the different language, the sheer language difference.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we're EY, right? So we can't rely on the internet.
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
but I mean, you've probably seen this, and if you haven't, it's really pretty remarkable. Is that on the internet though? And if anyone has specific subscription to the equivalent on the internet in a broad way, and I know I have that on a personal basis as well, and see my daughter does too, and she uses it for university now. It's kind of accepted, right, that we're all using that. If but on the broader internet aspect of things, you can also ask those questions. The
Right.
fact is, you can't guarantee it's going to be accurate. But I don't know if you know this, but they've actually had the bots that are out there on the internet take like the CPA exam and other exams, and they've come back, and the law exams in certain countries, etc. They've come back and actually aced all of them. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I've seen some of those. Yeah, I've
I have
seen some
seen
of
that
those.
as
Pretty
well. I've
interesting.
seen some tests where they've had AI and a lawyer go head to head on reviewing a very extensive and gnarly contract that had purposeful errors in it, and the speed and the accuracy at which the AI could do it was in minutes, and the lawyer took 5 hours or something, and had a couple of errors. So yeah, it's absolutely remarkable. But maybe to underscore what you're talking about, Julie and Sherry, you should maybe opine on this. Is It's all about the large language model, right? The data that you have to train that AI, which you guys must have rich data from your.
The pace of change in the world of business is fast, and that drives incredible complexity for the world of human resources.
Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, a series of conversations with experts inside and outside the world of HR on how to innovate, measure, and evolve our practices.
Our goal is to help provide you with practical examples of how HR has to change to meet the complexity of the business environment.
Every week, we'll talk to new and different voices on all aspects of HR.
And at times, we'll get irreverent.
Silly, even.
And sometimes geek out on the data and technology that underlie the processes that drive the world of HR.
But the conversations are always insightful and fun. So please, enjoy the HR Data Labs podcast.
Transformation work and your payroll work, and not just that generic data that's anywhere, right? So that stuff is very important to training your AI.
That's right. And I think when it comes to payroll, I mean, we all know payroll, right? It's expected to be 100% perfect. No one cares if it's perfect, but certainly mistakes are not warranted or allowed. Or I guess we all know the reality, right? Sometimes they do happen. But I think as a whole, it's about really controlling the data. And you're right, that's really secret sauce on that. The other thing that you might be interested when we did this first use case, and And we did it not only as a pilot, but then we started getting clients involved. We did it as a POC, I'm sorry. And then we did it as a pilot to get clients involved. And what we did is we actually did it under lots and lots of control, right? And again, the second phase, when we call it a crawl, is without PII, right? Because this, I mean, again, this model and this technology is learning, and we can't predict what are the answers it's going to be, it's going to give without a lot of prompt engineering and a lot of trials. And so the second thing we did was we said, okay, here's our hypothesis. It can actually increase client sat, it can increase accuracy, it can decrease time and increase efficiencies. And as you probably know, the research shows that both millennials and Gen Zers, they'd rather chat than talk anyway, right? So it's kind of where the next generation of workforce is going. And I can tell you, not only did we see that it could answer all of those items, but we saw a 30% increase in accuracy from a human agents and human, assisted with chatbots, with regular chatbots. We saw a 25% customer satisfaction increase. We saw the time take for average closing of tickets from a couple days, or many hours, to less than 23 seconds. And we also saw the first resolution, which, if as you know, with employee inquiries, is like the holy grail. How many of these can we get the question and the answer right away, actually double? So that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is impressive. I tell you what I'm excited about is to see it applied to compliance. I think that's going to be a tremendous helping hand, right? Augmentation for the practitioners, having to scour all that and maintain systems, and the opportunity for Gen AI in that area is just super exciting.
For sure, for sure. Sherry, you foreshadowed right when you started this story about the journey and beginning with your hypotheses and the inquiry support. You foreshadowed that then, as you start to crawl, you're going to get into, okay, what happens when we introduce PII? So I almost can't wait to hear that, and I'm hoping that's where you're going to go next.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
how did you
Sure.
start to tamper with PII and not pull your hair out or sleep none at night?
Sure. So I think that the second thing then we did, and this is only the first use case. Obviously, there's lots of other stuff going on, but is we said, okay, now that we've figured out that we can prompt engineer back to the regulatory compliance, and really we put regulatory compliance, we put anatomy of a payslip, because no employee really understands their payslip either, right? And we put company policies, just so you know. So the first crawl part took company policies, linked it with regulatory data, and also linked it with anatomy of a payslip, just so that we had that as a baseline. And we had to add synonyms. I mean, we had to add a lot of other things that you wouldn't think about, especially because, remember, we removed our functionality from the internet, right? We
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
want it to find things on the internet. So we had to teach it that fuel and petrol, for example, are the same word, or synonyms and mean the same thing. So then what we did is we went to a walk phase where we added PII data. And I will tell you, when we first started, and we wanted to see about hallucinations, which you may have heard about, that are sometimes common. And basically, hallucination is the bot makes up stuff, right?
Hmm, hmm.
And also we had to look at, how would it, if we put prompt engineering to try and tell it what it could not answer, would it actually abide by those things? So we entered in PII, and we did it really in a very controlled environment. And quite frankly, as we started this, the first thing we did was we entered synthetic PII, if you want to know the truth, because we weren't ready yet to make that
Right.
huge jump to, hey, let's have PII in there. So we added synthetic PII, and we really learned a lot. I mean, what we learned is a couple things. One is that we had to do a lot more prompt engineering so it could actually understand the information it was getting. We did have to go back and say, look, here's the rails. Like, for instance, you can't, if someone asks you, hey, what does Sheri Sullivan make and how does that compare with everybody else? There are questions that you can't answer. And the thing that around this technology, which is so awesome, is you don't have to give it question answer. But on the flip side, it's super risky, the fact that you can't predict humans and what the human's going to ask it, and therefore you can't predict what it necessarily will answer. So we need to make sure that we put the rails in. So we had some of that, but I can tell you the learning from that is we saw pretty similar type of results, that it was able to ingest, able to understand, and able to actually control who it actually shared the information to and how. So it was able to actually learn and segment what it's allowed to do with some of those rails. So that was pretty interesting. The other thing, I mean, just to mention around this, we also wanted to make sure there wasn't discrimination and bias, right? Which
Hmm.
is something no one talks about, but
Oh yeah.
certainly, and also that there was confidentiality and data privacy aspects actually contained and respected, and that was pretty challenging.
I'm thinking even just the roles based access or permissions, that I don't know if that's part of the PII, but you would have had to have some frame of reference for whether a manager can access information for their team, or who has permissions to touch what in that world.
That's right. That's right. No, no, we had to go back and say, is that in order? Is it clear? Right? Did we think through all of the different data sources and elements? And is there any difference in that? I mean, because of what we've done and because we're EY, we took a very conservative approach to that. But that was really important. And then I think so we were able to see that, and quite frankly, we were able to now see the bot take on more than just I'm a Hungarian employee and I'm going to have twins next month and I'm taking paternity leave, and what are my benefits and how is that going to manifest itself in my pay. That was the crawl phase. It was able to answer that, but now we were able to say, please give me the calculations and scenarios as to what are my options. Should I take paternity on the first day that my baby's born? Should I take it on a month later? Should I do whatever? And we saw pretty complex answers coming back with some really good calculations around the synthetic data. It wasn't perfect, but it actually was much more in depth around those type of answers, which was again super impressive. We tried it in many languages, and so that's kind of that walk phase. Um, and then the run phase I'll just get to is really using real PII data. And we've just started running into that area. Maybe running is the wrong word. It's called a run phase, but we've been tiptoeing into that area with very controlled pilots to make sure that we can control them, that we understand who has access back to your workflow, and that we can actually test them. And as you can imagine, with client pilots, usually a lot of that is tested with some of the individuals that are part of the testing team, right? They're actually testing on their own data, so that they can actually give you feedback as to, is the bot able to do that, or am I seeing other things? And of course, everyone in payroll. So I don't know if there's any questions on that, but that's kind of the process and where we are. We have not yet published this as a feature on our tool set. We certainly have a path toward that, but as you can see, we're being extremely cautious as to how do we do that. And some of that's because this is payroll, right?
Yeah.
If it was something else, it would be different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. You have to go slow.
I have a tactical thought, as you were talking about the walk phase, right? And so you got to a point where there's some complex calculations and some very good information that's coming out of there. Maybe not perfect, but it's pretty solid, and there's some good indications. So then what is the approach from there? Is it, I have to get it to perfect because it's something that touches payroll, or is it, like it can be fairly good and we need to have disclaimers and forward-looking statements, like all of that sort of thing. I mean, what is the approach to refine from there, or the tolerance for perfection or imperfection?
Yeah, so I think I think the tolerance overall, I mean, if I'm very blunt, is that the bot actually answers things accurately up to 95%, right?
Mhm.
I think that's what we're looking at, as well as working with clients that are doing these pilots with us, as to how are they going to actually, what's the governance structure that they're going to put as well on their side to actually help answer and confirm these next 5%. And I think also it's really kind of a slow roll to begin with until we get really bullish that we have enough evidence and enough data points to know that this really works. Is one of the other things is to really look at how do you have controls? And the one thing we built, so I should tell you what's on the back end. First of all, on the back end of this, we build how do we understand the thumbs up, thumbs down, and feedback from every single question so we can actually track how it's learning. And one of the things, Julie and Pete, you will think this is hysterical. We had to actually train our testers not to play around with it.
Looking for the inside scoop on payroll? Whether you're a payroll pro or just curious about your paycheck, we've got two podcasts you cannot miss. It's about Payroll delivers the latest trends for payroll pros, and it's about your paycheck is here for employees, breaking down pay and rights in simple terms. Two great shows, two great hosts, and endless insights to keep you informed and empowered. Subscribe now and elevate your payroll knowledge. Brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets people.
What if I told you that your boss skydives, Tim in marketing is a magician, and Sam in accounting does sums in his head while standing on his hands? Seeing sides of the people you work with but never see, sides that inform and inspire their work and that can inspire yours, is what The Talent Show is all about. Email me, Tom Alexander, host of The Talent Show, at talentshow@backboneinc.com and show us what you got. I look forward to seeing you on The Talent Show.
Think about this. Think
Yeah.
about how you normally demo a system. You try and break it. So you
Yep.
actually, even if the answer's right, you put a down arrow because you want to see what it will do. Well, with this kind of technology, you can't do that because it actually thinks it's really wrong. And then probably there's the potential that the next time that question is answered, it will answer incorrectly increases, right?
Yeah.
So
Dude,
you have to always think about, yeah.
You just gave me a dream job, 5 minutes ago of break the bot, person.
Yeah.
And then you just took it away.
You know what's funny? It reminds me of I had a conversation with a large employer at HR Tech. I'm sure you've been, Sheri, and we were sitting and we were talking about change management. And I asked, it reminds me exactly of this. I said, what do you do for change management as you roll out these new technologies? She goes, candidly, our employees somewhat lead it organically themselves. And I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, we provide FAQs and an overview, like a video or something for how to do whatever the new change is. She said, but the reality is they take it and play with it and they learn and then teach each other. And she said, so it's become like this really amazing change management process where we have them eager to engage with it and play around, and we encourage that, and they ultimately learn it and then pass that on. So it kind of sounds the same way, right? Like let them tinker around and get comfortable with it and learn how to use it, right? And
Yeah,
break
that's
it.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And the other thing we've done, Julie, is as well as our POC break the bot instances are separate from the client pilots that we're doing for exactly that reason. Because the first one was let's break the bot, let's do everything we can, and then the second one was oh gosh, it's learning when we actually, even if it gives a good answer and we do thumbs down and give it feedback, well now it's learning that that's not the right answer and it's searching for the right answer. So we were like, okay, we have to have pristine environments, and quite frankly, each client pilot with us right now has its own environment. I'll be very blunt with you on that. And on the back end, we have lots and lots of detail around what were the questions that were asked, what was the answer. So we do have team members actually looking through and doing the quality control check on those right now until we are, and measuring every single metric we can on this to make sure that we can control it. But the other thing is there's dashboards on that. There's a full list of what are those items. The team looks at that. But we've also done something where within EY, we've actually published this skill, not the one with PII, but the one without. We published this skill within our own tech as well so that it can be used by the broader EY community overall. And, we're almost 400,000 people around the globe, so that we can also learn from them and from their use of the regulatory compliance knowledge and all of that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how we're going. I think the first client that goes live, as we go into that, it will be a very measured, we'll have a lot of data on those countries. We'll roll out likely country by country, or I should say country legal entity one at a time, and really do it in a safe way until we have a lot of confidence. And again, a lot of this is because it's payroll. Like we
Yeah.
use Gen AI all the time on our personal, right? The ways we interact with different applications, etc. But this is a real payroll application. We need to make sure that it's protected.
Oh yeah. And Sherry, it sounds like you guys work very closely with your clients, which I think is fantastic with any innovation. I'm sure you've learned that over the years. But like how much are you maybe your client, because you guys are dealing with some of the bigger enterprises out there, right? Very, very, very savvy firms. Are they coming to you with this is new to us, new to our organization? Or are they coming to you saying, hey, we're performing pretty well in some other areas of our business, maybe on the front end or in other product areas where they're already having some learnings with AI and not coming to you totally green? Or are you more or less maybe the tip of the spear for them as far as AI goes?
Well, I think if you would have asked me last year when we were first doing the POCs and the first client pilots, which kicked off in June of last year, and I think we all knew that this technology was widely available not until January. So on that, we were kind of tip of the spear. But I can tell you since that time what's happened, and I think if you talk with any C-suite, Gen AI is on their radar, right? How do they use it from production, and how do they use it back office, and how do they actually lean into this? And I think what we're seeing is that companies now have, most of them have identified a Gen AI kind of leader within the organization, and there are actually a ton of work cases, use cases, and they're working toward that. And so it's more of a partnership. We still are leading in many ways, and in some cases, we actually get just partnered up with the initiative they're doing. And I think, I mean, since this podcast is for payroll leaders, I would strongly encourage that if they haven't done, they actually connect within their organization and figure out who's actually leading this, what are the use cases, and how do they get involved. I personally think when I talk with organizations that we are not doing enough, and I say we in the broader sense, around POCs, around pilots, and around use cases and showing. And I'll just give you an example. One of the things I didn't mention about all of this first use case was just the impact on cost. And actually, we estimated with clients, and of course it differs per client, but some of them, that it would save about 80% of their current cost to serve clients, serve employees on their questions. And that is significant. With every company I'm dealing with, they're looking for how do they actually save back office money, become more efficient, have a better employee experience. And so if you think about that, that's pretty dramatic. So I think most companies are trying to figure out what to do. I think unfortunately, sometimes payroll leaders don't feel empowered enough to get involved and be at the tip of the sword for this. And this, I mean, think about all the data in payroll, and we can go to use case two if you'd like. But really, this is the time to shine if you're
It
in payroll.
is. Oh, it is. It is. They have such rich skills, and now this augmentation is just going to be a blessing. So I
I
love it.
do. I do wonder. I know. We have folks that will want to hear some more of the use cases, but I did want to ask before that. Does the way that you're approaching this tend to have you focusing on broadly on use cases that will work or apply, universally or in every country, or does the approach tend to have you looking at kind of unique processes or countries and figuring out how do we optimize what's going on in there? I mean, what's the balance, and kind of where is this taking you on your journey?
Yeah, so I think so if you think about the different use cases, so for the first one that we talked about, which was, really answering employee queries and also quite frankly, administrator queries, right? You mentioned Pete, the whole lawyer example. I think if you can have from a regulatory compliance perspective, I think those are universal. So I think those doesn't matter which country, where you are located, what language you speak, those use cases are universal and the pain points are universal, right? I think if you think about some of the other use cases, so some of the things we're doing with clients is we actually have done some digital worker type of projects. And if you don't know what digital worker is, it's actually for better reason, it's a low code RPA. So it functions just like you would an RPA, but now it's low code because it's LLM. And it also can be easily programmed and used by business leaders and by individuals in the business. So if you think about all these manual processes that even though we've kind of moved from one stage to the next, they still plague payroll. what you find is that before you had to have RPA only worked if it was highly repeatable. You had to have somebody specific with the programming knowledge and language to get in and actually do it. And now you don't have to do that anymore with things like the digital worker. You can say, we have a use case with a client. I'll use just one of them where they have in Switzerland, they have a ton of child allowances. It's a huge process. There's no program really developed to handle everything they have to handle, including policy, checks, approvals, all of those things. And it's just taking a ton of time for the payroll team to actually get ready for, because as you may know, payroll teams tend to have to do a lot of these things. And so they were able to actually very quickly actually take this low code RPA, put it together, and actually it's saved hundreds of hours every single month just by doing that. And so I think, to your question, Julie, I think those type of technologies now allow you to really look specifically at the country process.
Oh yeah, low
Yeah.
code and no code microservices has been huge. I think for payroll, not having to involve IT to go write a report or make some sort of change to a table or a pay code. It's such a blessing. The speed and agility of that are just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we also have some other use cases. I don't know if you're interested
Yeah,
in,
for sure.
but
Share,
Yeah.
share
yeah,
another one or two here. That'd be great.
yeah, sure. So one is around, reporting, right? So certainly, what we've been able to do is to see this new technology really focus on reporting, and it can be as simple as something like a Copilot. And I don't know how many of you have Copilot on your, if you're a Microsoft shop, on your machines, but that's been pretty amazing because we know payroll teams do lots of Excel jockeying. And now with this technology, it's able to do it for you. So you can actually say, compare these three files and tell me the anomalies, for example. And that comes right with the feature. You just have to learn as a user how to use it. Another one is around, broader reports, right? And now there's the technologies which allow, again, normal language to actually go into your data model. You got to have your data model in order, right? But go into your data model and actually answer questions. And so long gone are now the times when I have a 41 different reports because someone might ask me for it and I'm afraid I won't have it and I'll be caught off guard. But now is the time where you can actually say, look, I have the data model. It's put in the same database. It's mapped correctly, and therefore I can rely on the technology sitting on top to actually ask it questions in normal language, and it can immediately produce the results, give me a chart, give me something, because we love Excel, to export out on Excel, etc. So that's really changing the workload. I think when I talk with payroll teams, they spend tons of time on the source to gross, tons of times on the control, right? And tons of times on the reporting at the back end. And so that's another use case that we're seeing. And that's not just such a use case, it's actually out in the market and being used. So I don't know if there's any questions on that from an analytics perspective.
I've been thinking about the fact that I've probably spent the better part of my career with a goal to actually become a whiz at pivot tables, and I've spent my entire career not becoming a whiz at pivot tables, and
or
so
access databases to fill
yeah,
gaps.
yeah,
Yeah.
or access.
That's
And
my
so I'm
favorite.
thinking, like, I can actually fill some of my own gaps, I hope, in the next several years, and I can actually spend a lifetime never having to become a
Oh,
whiz at the
the
pivot
the the
table.
access databases, Sheri, you'll appreciate this, Julie. How many times have you gone into an organization for like a due diligence and you find like, oh, and this is years ago, probably more now than now, is that you'd have some guy, Kevin or whatever, down in the basement, and he maintains these 3 access databases that hold payroll together. And without him, we can't we can't process payroll. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's microservices, right? That's integrations. You can now bring a solution to that problem versus having to go build something. So yeah, pivot tables and access databases. Power payroll, boy. They power more payroll than you would think.
That's right. They do.
Yeah,
They
they
do.
do.
And I think with this new technology, as we move into it, we're still going to need good database, right? With all the
Yeah.
data, we're going to need, but one of the other use cases I didn't mention is this whole payroll mapping. So you have a database, that's great. But if we don't have a data model that is consistent, and it could be for one country, for two, for three, for four, but now what you're able to do is use this technology and this generative AI AI to actually do the mapping for you,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. And also have the controls around it, right? Because we've all seen mapping that's been done where you're supposed to have, I don't know, 200 different items and you end up with 2,000 because everybody thinks that this thing is special, right? So now you also have some governance around it as well. And that's certainly a use case that, that we're applying, but we're also seeing clients apply as well to these databases that they've actually created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that, Sherry, as kind of the um, an alternative to the whole integration bit or even implementation? Right. That's where I tend to hear a lot of excitement around that area is
Data
related to
migration.
all the data
Yeah.
mapping or integration that has to happen, as opposed to the ongoing care and feeding of that. That seems to be a peak interest is in that one-time burst of effort. Is that also how you're seeing some of that applied, or is it as much ongoing as?
Before we move on, I need to let you know about my friend Mark Pfeffer and his show, People Tech. If you're looking for the latest on product development, marketing, funding, big deals happening in talent acquisition, HR, HCM, that's the show you need to listen to. Go to the Work Defined Network, search up People Tech, Mark Pfeffer. You can find him anywhere.
But well, right now it's really ongoing, but let's talk about implementation.
Yeah.
With this new technology, you can actually be in a position where it actually pulls the data. All you need is a big data dump. It should be able to actually compare it to what you need to do business in that country. It should be able to actually look and see what are those things that are outside of it and actually help you really clean up that data. So instead of, I don't know about you, the implementation requirement gathering process is got to be one of the most
Oh yeah.
difficult
Onerous.
ones. I'm
Yeah.
being nice here. Processes in payroll, and my hats off to all those people in implementation that work so hard on this. But this technology should change their job dramatically. I haven't seen it yet,
Yeah.
but I can see it coming, and in that you'll be able to take just a big data dump of last 24 months, and it should be able to compare it to what is it that you need in the country, along with what are the regulatory requirements, and be able to spit out here's the exceptions that you need to dig in with your client. And that would be an amazing, amazing change in implementation.
Hey,
Oh
what
yeah.
payroll person out there isn't thinking parallel testing days,
Oh.
kiss you goodbye, or
Oh yeah.
like, yeah,
Or it'll
this
take
right.
this can look
minutes.
a
Yeah.
whole different thing, right?
Minutes to do parallel
Right.
versus, months. Yeah. No, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Awesome. Well, it's so helpful to get some specific use cases. Are there for payroll, Sherry? Are there touch points that jump out at you more than others? Like I know we've talked about some of the front end ones, and starting with the inquiry support and maybe modeling changes that drive what payroll is going to look like. But anything in time and attendance or GL that's jumped out at the top of the list, or other touch points that are just painful leaves for payroll?
Yeah. Well, I think, so one of the most difficult things that I think clients deal with are leave management, right? And now with this type of technology, I think we're going to see just a real difference in the ability to actually manage those around the globe. Because as you know, they're different for every single country. They're pretty complex depending on which country you're involved. And I know there's lots of systems out there, but the ones that handle leave management well are the local to local ones.
Yeah.
I think that that's coming. I haven't seen a product yet around that, but I can feel that that is probably the next in a big area. And it kind of relates to this digital worker use case that I mentioned before, in that it's really country specific, a big, big issue, and lots of requirements around that, whether it's reporting to the government, whether it's affects actually the net or gross pay, all of those things. So I think that that is probably one key area that we're going to see. I think as far as GLs, we just talked about the payroll mapping. I think from a GL perspective, yeah, absolutely. I think the ability for this technology to actually not follow that mapping all the way through to GL creation and also balancing And again, imagine if you work in a payroll team and you actually have this technology in order, then what it does is it actually spits out to you, not that the GL file actually didn't go through, but what were the areas before it tried to send that don't balance, that need to be looked at and confirmed by the human nature. And I think the last thing I would just say is one of our approaches is human at the center for all of this, right?
Yeah.
And really, I think in order, our key learning around generative AI has been that people need to be at the center of the transformation agenda and drive it. And when they are, and they need to create the vision. And when they are, I think what we've seen is that you have about a 2.5 times acceleration in the rate of transformation success. And so that's really important. I do think all of us have to reskill. You heard me say at the beginning, I'm an old dog. And so I'm able to learn some new tricks, which is pretty amazing. But I think, reskilling for the future. And that really goes to how do I connect? How do I take classes? I actually am working on an AI badge. How do I take classes? How do I understand? As well as, quite frankly, I have someone on our team who is totally into this. He's really amazing. I call him my AI Yoda, and I go to him for absolutely everything. And so I think all of us in payroll, I think the skills we have today and the skills we need tomorrow are completely different.
Awesome. I have one last question, Sheri, because I know we've been at this for a little bit, but I feel like we would be missing something if we didn't ask you about business case and how are payroll leaders that you're interacting with today moving faster or creating, the case for change or figuring out how to actually get a little bit of traction in this space. What are there tips and tricks? Are there things that you're seeing that successful payroll leaders are using to actually dig in and make something happen here?
Yeah, and are they moving fast enough, right? I don't I debate that that organizations, firms practitioners I'm talking to, they don't feel their organizations are reacting quickly enough.
I mean, you're right. When everyone is focused on, hey, I need to take all this generative AI, I need to actually put it in the front part of my product so I can actually sustain and live as a business. What we're seeing is any back office function is taking a back seat, right, from a transformation perspective. And payroll is no different. I think, and also the company may not figure out, like, how do I have the funds to make the changes in the business case that I need? I think, and you all know, when you look at traditional payroll business cases, there's actually tangible costs and there's a ton of intangible. I'm always reminded of the iceberg example. But those intangibles, the cost is out there. It's just about how do you actually quantify and pull it together. So what I'm seeing is a couple things. One, which I don't tend to be a risk first person, but one is a lot of my clients are having a lot of success by really pointing out the risk. And I'll give you an example. Since, cyber attacks are certainly up, they're certainly up on payroll. There's a lot of companies out there that have managed to do payroll cheap and cheerful, but with lots of risk around their technology, around their infrastructure, around their backup. That is certainly several of the clients I deal with are really taking a risk-based approach and showing and proving that money's being spent anyway, and what they're doing is kind of penny wise and pound foolish, if you will, as well as increasing the risk. So that's one approach. I think what I'm seeing a lot of leaders do is really figure out, how do I elevate payroll within the C-suite and within my company? And then how do I actually identify, quantify, as part of my business case, all of the leakage or items that are happening around payroll? And actually, how do I actually set up a self-funding mechanism? So as those are identified, I can actually share with my operation, with my stakeholders, my operation leader, with my CHRO or head of VP Comp and Ben, with my CFO, so that I actually am able to self-fund my transformation through the transformation of the payroll and also the upstream processes. So I think that's what I'm really seeing grab hold. So I don't know if you've seen other things, but those are the two kind of approaches that I'm seeing that are being extremely successful.
Yeah.
Cool tactics. Well, we're at we know we're early on, right? Especially if folks are trying to do things themselves versus as part of a large organization that does this with multiple clients. So I'm sure we'll see all sorts of things here as the year unfolds.
Great. It's going to be exciting.
Yes, it is. It is. It's very exciting. A little scary, right? But it's also incredibly exciting for so many things, right? I mean, humanity in general, but we have to be careful. Like you said, be cautious, walk, crawl, walk, run, protect the data, protect the people, and I think we can do some good stuff with it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sheri, we don't want to leave today without asking where folks can reach you and what's up for next for
Yeah.
you.
Sure. Well, I love payroll, as I said before. Certainly, anyone who's interested can reach out to me, can connect with me on LinkedIn, or can shoot me over an email. And my email is really simple. It's sherry.sullivan@ey.com.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll list that in the description to make sure people can get in touch with you. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Julie, what do you have going on? Anything?
I'm on the verge of having one of those micro surveys in HRAI that
Awesome.
will be ready for prime time, and we'll be looking to get some practitioner input on that. How about
Yeah.
you?
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah. Let me know if I can help. Well, yeah, I got a bunch of events coming up. So I'll be out there in quite a few places speaking at the Capital Summit with the Payroll Org. I'm doing the IPPA event out in Vegas with Team iSolved. So yeah, it's going to be fun. And of course, the Payroll Profession Confidence Survey is still running. If you haven't gotten in on that, get your voice heard. We need every payroll practitioner to share in that. So please take that as soon as you can. I really appreciate it.
Perfect. Not a lot of time. So yeah, jump in and do it.
I know. Well, look, this has been great, Sheri. Thank you so much for joining us, and Julie, it's always a pleasure as well.
Same here.
Until next time, take care, everyone.